prepared to get started. Excited to be talking and working with you and seeing you all virtually. If you are on the line, I'm going to mute it right now. If you are not, please feel free to do that, and we will certainly allow you to come off of mute at times you need to address the group. President,
adequate testing and tracing still lack.
Getting some background. Thank you. I'm going to be working with you all in the next several months around this work, important work for the Civilian Review Board work group, as you know, really trying to set the structure, the framework, and making sure we have the right pieces in place to build a Civilian Review Board that has both some teeth, that is thoughtful, and really does serve our residents in effective ways. And so you all really are central to that. Tonight we kick off with more of an orientation of sorts. Really to make sure that we understand the lens by where you're coming from. We want to really make sure we orient the group to the process that's ahead of us. And then we roll up our sleeves and get to work around making some critical decisions about how does this work, how will this board look eventually, and getting your perspective about how it is we will do that in an efficient way. I'll get into all that over the course of the month. Most of you are friends, or I have worked with you in some capacity over these several years, so it's good to see all the ones that I have been working with. I did want to introduce to folks that I probably haven't had a chance to work with as much. You should be able to see. So our firm at Raymond, we're in our 17th year here in Columbus, and we're proud of that. It's a city where I didn't grow up in, but it's certainly embraced me and the firm we built here in Columbus. We are certainly no stranger to the city and some of its more complex projects that we tend to get drawn into over the last few years. A few of those you see listed there. So we've certainly been involved with the public safety listening tours the mayor did in his last administration, in his first term. We've done things. We were part of the Matrix Operation Review. We did all the community engagement work around that to really talking to residents across the city about the reforms that they would like to see in our Columbus Police Department. I know all of you are familiar with that report. We also are engaged with things like My Brother's Keeper, as well as the firm who kind of led the short no parking work during the last administration as well. I mention all that because, one, certainly we do know our friends in the city, but in addition to that, my work here really is to take you all on the journey of trying to make sure we build this board, that we are thoughtful about any potential hiccups, and that we are proactive in thinking about those things up front. And so in just a minute, you'll hear the charge from our mayor about how important this work is, and we really want to just to underscore the fact that we are partners in this work with you. I put the last bullet I put here is probably the most important, which is that I'm really just your impartial tour guide. My job is to take you down the journey of planning and doing this work to make sure that we do that in an effective and efficient way, and that all voices at the table are equally represented during the course of this process. We won't necessarily agree. In some cases, we don't need to agree, but we'll be working toward consensus. And in my world, consensus just means I can live with it and I'll support it. And both of those pieces are really, really important. So every aspect we will openly discuss, share perspectives around, and ultimately, at the end of this process, you'll be asked to make an endorsement of the framework that you are building for the Civilian Review Board, which is going to be seated, we hope, by the end of the year. And so that's our kind of intent. I also said I'm your compass. So now I'm your tour guide. My other job is to make sure we keep the North Star and the main thing, the main thing. And so, as you know, first of all, as an African-American man in this community, these issues certainly aren't lost on me at all. But there is a charge for this group, and that is to make sure we build a Civilian Review Board that is responsive to what our community is saying to us, that's being represented by your voices, but it's also to make sure that we understand and take into account those voices along the way. And at the same time, not to get caught in some of the lower level issues, which are all critically important, but may not be the charge of this particular group. And so my compass for this group will be to make sure we continue to stay focused on that North Star as we do our work. Other than that, I love to travel the world. I think I can cook most days, and I'm starting to ride my bike more. So those are just a few personal things that kind of help to round out my facilitation experience. I'm going to get ready to bring up our city's fearless leader and let him open up with opening comments and kind of set the stage for this work, and then we will come back and allow each of you to introduce yourselves and share a few opening thoughts. So with that, I'm going to move into comments from Mayor Ginther, if he would come and bring greetings and also talk about his charge for this important work. Mayor?
Thank you, Mo, and good afternoon to everybody. Thanks for joining us and for answering this most important call to service. The work that you and your colleagues are going to be engaged with is some of the most important work that we're engaged with as a community, as a city right now, and I'm grateful for your time, perspective, and engagement. I want to thank Mo Wright, Laura Baker Morris, City Attorney's Office, Ron Linville, Baker Hostetler, and obviously each and every one of you. I want to thank you for agreeing to serve and for lending your voice to this important work right now. Our neighbors are looking to us for a path forward around change and reform to make sure that everyone feels safe in this community. As you've already figured out, you're a very diverse group: activists, attorneys, former law enforcement. That was purposeful. We want different experiences and points of view as we lay the groundwork for this important board. You'll also probably notice that there's some folks that have been very critical of me, very critical of the administration and the Division of Police. And that is by design. We want to make sure that voices are heard and perspectives are shared from across the community. We are the only large city in the U.S. without any kind of civilian review board. And I think that's unacceptable. As you know, we're allowing residents to vote in November to make a civilian review board part of our charter, and that it remains fully funded in the years ahead. That means a different mayor or a different city council cannot simply do away with the board without returning to the people for a vote. Your job is to make recommendations to establish an independent civilian review board to investigate officer misconduct, recommend discipline, and provide for civilian oversight and accountability for the Columbus Division of Police based on national best practices and community expectations. You'll examine similar boards in other cities and make recommendations on, among other things, how the board will be seated and structured, and the policies, procedures, and funding necessary to accomplish its mission. We're at a critical point in our city's history as we move beyond the status quo to make our city more equitable. What you decide will have a lasting impact on how we police and the safety of all of our residents. Again, to each and every one of you, I want to say thank you for answering this call to serve, and look forward to an enlightened, engaged, robust process where you can share your thoughts, ideas, engage, ask tough questions, and make sure that we come out of this process with the very best model for police oversight, civilian oversight of our Division of Police that works for Columbus, the best in the country. So with that, I'll turn things back over to Mo, but thanks again for what you're doing for this city and our community.
Thank you, Mayor, for those opening comments. I'm going to get you my screen back in just a second. All right. There we go. So and we'll get to this, but all of the documents from today's meeting, there's a website built. All of the PowerPoint, the ancillary documents will be posted publicly for those who might be following this as a part of our resident community. They also will be there for you. So both the agenda and all the things we're sharing tonight will be posted there. That is, in essence, what you see on the screen there, the nutshell of what the mayor just gave you in terms of the charge of this particular group. Let me jump in then to our charges for this evening. We have about a four-part agenda. We're well into number one now. Right after this, we're going to move into a period of introductions because we really want to know who you are and your perspective and lens as you come to this work. So that's going to be important for you all to, and then some of you know each other and some of you may not. And so that's important that I wish we could be in a room where I could do all kinds of interactive fun stuff with you to build your relationships. We can't do that right away. We'll make virtual work as much as possible. Just keep engaging with us and staying a part of the conversation as we kind of move on. We'll get into both the responsibilities of a work group generally, as well as we'll get into specifically some of the things the mayor already talked about, and we'll remind you of what we really want the outcome of this group to be. And every meeting we have will build on the previous work of the previous meeting. And so it will be an iterative process. You will learn along the way. You will both be listening to what folks are doing in other places as input, but you're not bound by it. You all are developing a group to address Columbus and Columbus issues, and therefore you may decide that some things are working naturally that are great. In other cases, you may want to do something a bit differently, and that'll be okay as we bring forth those particular aspects over the course of the next couple of months. I want to hear from you around what the success looked like in just a few minutes, and then some things we must keep in mind as a part of this process. And I'll talk a little bit about just kind of how these meetings will go and what the format and structure of them will be. After that, we'll move into a presentation from our Chief of Staff, Kim Paul, who will overview the Charter Amendment. All of you know that is on the ballot for November. We're moving in that direction, so he will overview the particular aspects of the legislation and the process therein to move that toward law in the city of Columbus. And we also have a presentation following him, Ron Linville, where Bacon Hostetler will take you through an understanding of what's happening with civilian review boards on the national landscape. We wanted to kind of really quickly ground you in how some of those groups are organized in other places, what are they doing, what kind of power and scope do those groups have, and so you'll get a chance to engage with Ron as a part of that process. We also want to know, after both of those presentations, early on today, you may say, hey, Mo, I'm at the table, I'm willing to be a part of this, I want to build the best civilian review board that we can. I don't know enough about this particular topic, and that is okay. And so one of the things we want to do is to give you all an opportunity to lift up any particular things you want to know about as we plan future meetings. Let's start to build that agenda in terms of either presentations or maybe they're just resources or documents you need to have under your fingertips in order to do the work that you're doing. So I would just ask you to keep those things in mind, and then at the appropriate time, we'd love to hear from you around some of those particular topics. And then we'll get into the meeting schedule, just some parameters about how we will come back together in future meetings, and then what days, what times of the week. We won't actually schedule tonight, but we will get from you the parameters so that we can poll you for appropriate days and times after today's meeting is over. And then from there, I'm going to have just a brief discussion where everybody can kind of weigh into for the work group to put some additional thoughts on our minds, and then we'll close the meeting at that point. You know, as I would be in any face-to-face session, I will go with the energy of the room. We will see where we need to adjust the agenda as needed because the process has to work for you. And again, as that tour guide, I want to get us there, but I'm less concerned about if we take some different paths along the way. I will make sure that we get there at the end, however, and so that may mean at certain points I'm taskmaster or asking folks to be succinct or asking you to add something to the parking lot we might want to come back to. So just know that is perhaps a something we might talk about, and hopefully you are okay with that. With that said, I want to get you talking. I want to hear from all of you. I'm going to let you go in the order that I have you on my list so that we don't have the double Dutch conversation that happens on these Zoom calls. I'll call you. Here's what I want you to do. You're going to have just about a minute or less to do this. Obviously, tell me your name, tell me your affiliation or organization or any constituency you might be representing. Happy to hear that. But I also want you, the mayor just, but first of all, he invited you to participate. You took on that challenge. You know the difficult work that is ahead of us as a community, and yet you still said yes. And so I want you to give just a couple seconds around why you said yes to participate, and there'll be some other opportunities to talk about additional things you want to lift up in just a moment. But just as a way of introduction, tell us why you said yes and why this is important for you to be a part of building the infrastructure for this civilian review board. With that said, I'm going to go in the order I have you here. So Jasmine Ayers, my friend, you are up first for introduction.
I thought after elementary school I would be done with having to go first because of the last name, but I guess it never ends. Thank you for having me. I do want to thank the mayor. I know I probably give him a little bit of heartburn at night, but I appreciate the fact that he was willing to let me have a voice, have a seat at the table. So again, my name is Jasmine Ayers. I wear many hats sort of around the neighborhood, community organizer, People's Justice Project. I do a lot of work in the faith community. But I also have a master's in public policy, so I think I bring sort of a unique blend of what's happening on the streets with what's possible at the policy level. And I said yes because I am willing to do anything for my city. And you'll never forget the cries of the mothers as they're calling out for their children, those who have lost their families to police. And so I do it for them. And I do it for this community. And I do it because I think that we have the tools to be the best city in America. And so I'm willing to be in whatever room I need to be in for that to happen. So thank you for having me.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Jasmine. Look forward to working with you. Next up, Attorney Fred Benton. Say hello. So Fred on, is that right?
I believe he's on mute.
Fred, you may need to unmute for us.
Okay, there you go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fred Benton. I would like to begin with a statement of thanks to Mayor Ginther. Mayor, I think of the words of the scripture that says that a prophet is not without honor save in his own country. And you certainly are to be commended for the bold steps and the initiative that you have taken, despite the opposition, to address what is a critical issue within our community. And I want you to know that you're not alone in this endeavor. And I myself, and I know many others across the city, support you in this cause. I said yes because I've been involved in this issue for a substantial period of my life. My father was a police officer. As a criminal defense lawyer, I've seen firsthand the operations of the police department. I'm not here to say that all cops are bad or all cops are good. I'm just saying that there are issues certainly within our community that needs to be addressed. I am a member of the Mount Olivet Baptist Church. This has been an ongoing discussion within our community in terms of how these issues are addressed. And I do care about what happens within our community. My office is located right here on the near east side of Columbus. So I see upfront and personal the things that impact and affect our community. So I hope to be a contributing member to this cause and to do whatever I can and whatever I'm asked to do to support this endeavor.
Thanks, Fred. Next up, my friend Bo Chilton.
Yes, thank you. I am Bo Chilton, CEO of Impact Community Action. I am a passionate advocate for low-income people and disenfranchised communities. I'm certainly concerned about some of the relationships we've seen between police and our community. So I look forward to having the opportunity to be that advocate. I'm also a military veteran, and I have family members who are part of law enforcement. So I hope to be a bridge builder. And that's why I said yes.
That's good, Bo. We need more bridge builders. Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Dodley, say hello to the group.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Can you hear me now?
yes, sir. We can hear you, Doc.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. I've been knowing Andy Ginther since he's about 12 years old. And I worked with his parents when they started a board for parenthesis of working with young people. And I've been remaining consistent in the community. I've had the opportunity to work with almost everyone on this Zoom cast. I really believe that when we say they train police officers, I can train a monkey, but I can't teach him values. I think there's a way we need to be able to look at this implicit systemic bias that we all have. And I think my position in the community as an elder, and I'm going to make a difference between an elder and an older. Elders try to help solve problems. Olders just complain and don't do nothing about it at all. I have a program called SIMBA, which means safe in my brother's arms, and SIMSA, safe in my sister's arms. These are all rites of passage programs. I have combined and put those rites of passage ideologies to everything I do. I'm currently working with Bo Chilton at Impact, working with Restored Citizens. And the reason why I bring that up is because restored means that you're better than where you were before. And that's what we try to do. I try to get people to look at all the negative isms in our society. If we can look at those and address those and admit that we are part of those isms, I think we're off to a good start. And I don't have time to waste my time. So I think this is very valuable, and I look forward to making any contribution I can to make Columbus great. Because I really believe that it's better to build children than to repair adults. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Donnelly. Appreciate that. Next, Stephanie Hightower. Say hello. And Stephanie, before you start, folks, just for the sake of, I'm going to take the screen down because it allows the broadcast to see more of the faces. I'll put the PowerPoint back up at points that when we need to see it again. Just know you're saying who you are, your organization, and why you said yes. Thank you. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Thank you, Mo. You didn't introduce me as your friend like you did so with Bo. So I'm feeling some kind of way. And Dr. Dudley, we've been working together for years, and you didn't mention the Urban League, so that means I'm gonna go ahead and cut that contract when I get off the phone today. Since you didn't mention the Urban League.
Hey, Stephanie, he said 1 minute.
No, my turn. My turn. I'm Stephanie Hightower, President and CEO of the Columbus Urban League. We are the oldest civil rights organization here in the city of Columbus, 102 years old. In my role as the CEO at the Urban League, I consider myself a social justice warrior, and it is my responsibility to be a part of those issues that are impacting African Americans and under-resourced individuals. And this is one of those issues that I believe, and from a national perspective, we have been very vocal and we have been very face forward on how we can help to build the kind of bridges that you're talking about around police reform. I think it's important to know that the reason why I did this is I have had the privilege to serve with Andy, not only in his role as the mayor, but we had an opportunity to serve together as school board members. And I know his passion for public service. I believe in what he's bringing to the table. And what he has done is very courageous and historic by putting this review board in place. But what's more important is that we are going to put that charter in place in the fall that will ensure that a civilian review board, no one can come in and try to change it unless there is some whatever tsunami of a vote that would make that happen. So I appreciate the opportunity to serve, and I do believe in service. I am an Ohio State grad, and we believe in giving forward and paying forward. And so I appreciate the opportunity. I look forward to working with many of you I haven't had a chance to work with before. I'm already eyeballing some people to see how we can connect to do some bigger and better things at the Urban League. But thank you to all of you for your service as well. And I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, my friend, Stephanie. I appreciate that. Freddie Lamar, say hello to the group. Pastor, you there?
It's on mute.
There you go.
Okay, I did the same thing Fred Benton did. But my name is Pastor Lamar, Southside resident, been a resident for the Southside over about 40 years. I'm fully invested in the Southside. I'm the president of the Baptist Pastors Conference. The reason why I got on this board is because the mayor asked me, and I think that our theme this year for the Pastors Conference is a crisis, the community's need for the church. So I think at times, when when the community is going through hardship, people always look to the church. So the church got to be there to have the answer. The church got to be there with open arms. So I'm here to help in whichever way I can to make our community and city better.
Thanks, Pastor. I appreciate that. Next up, Kent Marcus. Are you on the line?
I am here.
Rolling. Good afternoon.
I have been involved in policing related issues for a long time. I've been the chief of staff in the Ohio Attorney General's office. I've been the chief counsel for the Ohio governor. And at the U.S. Justice Department, I was the first director of the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, which attempted to create a new way we thought about how police provide services to communities, the historical approach.
Go back with our help in an investigation. The continued coronavirus
Mayor Coleman
in the U.S. 6 months
advisory group.
The Trump administration.
And in my current position as the bar counsel at the Columbus Bar Association, I'm responsible for managing discipline in Central Ohio of attorneys, which is sort of another group that often doesn't like the idea that somebody might look into how they do their work and question whether they're doing it appropriately and ethically. So I have some familiarity with trying to deal with groups that don't always think that's a good idea. I look forward to working with all of you.
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate that. Welcome to the group. Jonathan McCombs. Say hello to the group.
Hello, everybody. My name's Jonathan McCombs. I'm the Dean of the College of Health and Public Administration at Franklin University. I work closely with Dr. Chanel Jones. My field is criminal justice. I have a master's and a PhD in criminal justice. I've written and studied on use of force and many other law enforcement related topics, including training for many years. I've presented both domestically and internationally on these topics. And I'm really passionate about how we can make sure that police are responsive to the community and that they embrace the change that's needed in this regard. I have a sort of unique perspective because I actually worked as a police officer in the Deep South for almost 10 years. So I know what it's like to be on the road, be on patrol. In fact, my backup officer was shot in the head on a traffic, related to a traffic stop. And I was involved in many search warrants. I worked a lot in narcotics, conspiracy investigations, and those sorts of things. But probably the main reason that I said yes to this, and I want to thank Mayor Ginther, my wife and I, we have 3 children, but in the last couple years, we accepted a foster child. We don't know his race, but we know he's brown and beautiful. And we adopted him in December, and I want to make sure that he and brown children like him aren't afraid of the police. That's I feel responsible, both as a citizen and as a parent, to make sure that happens. And so that's why I wanted to be part of this. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that perspective. A lot of value you and others will be bringing to the room. Attorney Muhammad, say hello to the group.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, everyone. My name is Ishmael Mohammed. I'm a solo practice attorney here in Columbus, Ohio. I have been for about 3 years now. Thank you to Mayor Ginther. Thank you to Brother Wright and everyone involved in making this possible. I said yes because I have, kind of seen firsthand some of the concerns with law enforcement and the community, and being a Somali American and representing a large voice of New American folks. I felt that their voice ought to be heard, and that's one of the reasons why I said yes. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad we have folks representing all kinds of community organizations, but to also have our attorneys who have both prosecute these kind of cases and see the other side of the equation often is so valuable to this process. So I appreciate you folks for being lending your time to this. Next up, Denzel, you want to say hello to the group?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. It's Denzel, not Denzel. Mr. Washington has much more money than I do. Just want to make sure that we don't get confused. I would like his money, though. But I, again, appreciate being a part of this. Denzel Porteous, he, him, his. I'm currently serving as interim executive director of Stonewall Columbus. Throughout the community, I'm engaged in a number of social justice warrior movements, if you want to call it that. Intersectional identity brings me to this table as a gay Black man, not from the U.S. All of these components mean something to me. I commend Jonathan. I'm also a foster parent with a beautiful brown daughter. I'm not sure what her full race is, but all of these things mean something to me as I'm a Black man in this community, but also raising a brown child in this community who will be impacted in the future. Columbus is not my home, but it is my adopted home. I've been in Columbus since 1998, and I will do anything, just like Jasmine, to ensure that we are demonstrating our capacity as a city to be a great city. And I appreciate and respect the mayor for calling us to be accountability partners in this particular work, which is why I said yes. I believe accountability is a true and truest form of leadership. When you know that there's a difficult task at hand and you need to ensure that you're doing it and doing it appropriately, you turn to others in the community to hold you accountable to the things that you said you will be doing. And so I appreciate him for leading into that space.
Wow, that's a great way to capture this work, an accountability partner. I think that's so appropriate to the work that we have ahead of us. Thank you so much for that introduction. Next, is it Asline or Aslyn, or neither of the above?
Asleen.
Asleen.
Like
Okay,
you're leaning.
there you go. I'll get it. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Asleen Rodriguez. I am the Director of Government Affairs for CODA, but folks on this call might know me from my experience and my want to impact transit, but through a social enterprise called Empower Bus. And so we were a microtransit company that was social enterprise, focused on getting low to moderate income communities to and from work, education, and healthcare. And so why I said yes is that my North Star has always been around access and equity. And this topic is critical for all communities to thrive. We know what we know about the history of how folks were kept out. And now it's time to bring everybody in and have this critical conversation so that everybody can thrive.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your thoughts and perspective. Look forward to working with you as well. Next up, we have Janae Stevens. Is Janae on the line?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, I can now, yes.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janae Stevens, and I am an attorney here in Columbus. I have been practicing now for just about 7, almost 8 years, and I practice in the labor and employment space. So I do a lot of employee discipline, kind of a little bit of union work. So that gives me kind of a unique perspective, I think, on these issues in particular. The reason that I said yes, I think, is twofold. One, I believe personally that lawyers have an ethical responsibility to say yes in these moments and to provide service and context. And when I actually left home, which is Reno, Nevada, to come to law school, my late grandmother told me, don't go off and be a lawyer and forget about us and forget about the community. And so to me, this is a way to circle back on that commitment that I made to her about 10 years ago. So.
Wow, very good. Thank you so much. Look forward to working with you as well. This next guy is a little bit of everywhere. I think I see him on every important meeting there is. Kyle Strickland, say hello to the group.
Hey, Mo, thanks so much for having me. Thanks so much, Mayor Ginther, City of Columbus, for having me on this. I am an attorney at the Kerwin Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity. In my role, I don't practice. I do work around legal policy, legal research. One of the reasons I said yes to this was one that I knew at the very least that the goal around this is to have a civilian review board with some actual teeth. And I think that's important at the end of this process that we get there, that this moment, as Denzel mentioned earlier, requires accountability. And that means accountability and oversight makes us all better as a community. And that means we have to lean into issues of systemic racism and discrimination and how that impacts everyone today, and especially when it comes to policing. We've got to tackle these issues head on. I know we can do that, and it's something that we all collectively have to play a role in. And we can't just talk about this as the single solution to these issues. This is only one piece of a broader issue around reimagining community safety, and I'm excited to be a part of this group. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Cal. That's a great reminder. This is just a piece of a much larger set of imperatives for our community, quite frankly. And so we know there's work happening in a lot of different places, and this is just one of those places. So again, thank you for being part of that, and good to see you, Cal. Erin, you're up next. Say hello to the group.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Sink. I'm a government affairs and public policy professional with a local lobbying firm. I also do a lot of community work in the South Side. It's neighborhood-based, where I'm the chair of the South Side Area Commission, vice chair. And then 2.5 years ago, I applied and said yes to the mayor's call for folks to serve on the Safety Advisory Commission. And I did that because I saw that trust was shaken in our community, between communities and police. And so wanted to look for solutions and ways to rebuild trust here in Columbus. And through that whole 2-year-long process with the Safety Commission, found that the recommendation for a civilian review board is really critical in restoring trust, like I said, where it has been shaken. So this is, a next logical step into the implementation, realizing that it's a complex undertaking that we have to set up a civilian review board, and hoping to provide a through line of the conversations we had with that body to this group. Thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Appreciate that. Next up, my other friend, if she's still talking to me, Ms. Nana Watson, NAACP. Say hello to the group. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can now. Yes, ma'am.
The civil rights organization in America, you're NAACP. I'm Nana Watson. And Mo, you are still on my list. But let me just say that I want to thank the mayor for considering the NAACP to serve on this committee that's going to be making a difference in our community. He took a courageous step. NAACP has been recommending a civilian review board with subpoena power for many years. I think we're almost there. So I'm looking forward to learning and to having great conversation with all of you about your thoughts as we begin to make our community a better place for the common good of our community. Thank you, Mo.
Absolutely. Good to see you, Nana. Last on my list, at least on the work group member side, is Anthony Wilson. Anthony, you with us? I see you there. Go ahead and say hello to the group.
No, thank you, Mo. First, I'd like to thank Mayor Ginther and his staff for allowing me the opportunity to serve the great citizens of Columbus once again. I am a retired Columbus Police Sergeant, former Assistant Chief of Police with the Westerville Division of Police, and current president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, Columbus, or Central Ohio Chapter. I love serving the citizens of Columbus. I'm born and raised in Columbus, a proud graduate of Columbus City Schools. And as a police officer, I proudly served the citizens of Columbus. I love the city. I love the people. And I'm proud to be able to serve in this capacity to help develop the framework for a CRB process that is fair, consistent, transparent, and that will build greater trust and collaboration between the police and the community. So thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. And let me just say, I think on behalf of everyone involved, this is a great group. You see the talent we have at the table and how diverse the perspectives will be. And that's really what it's going to take, I think, to build an effective policy as we really think about what does this Citizen Review Board even look like, and what kind of teeth does it have, and what happens when those touchy technical issues happen, I think this is the group to help us to think through it from a variety of perspectives, and that's really what it's all about. Let me also pause here before I allow the staff to say hello as well. A couple of questions I got privately I'm going to lift up to the group because I think they're both important. The first is you all will have all kinds of stuff, resources, websites, things like that you believe the other groups need to see. We are encouraging that. I'm going to have Kate Machado introduce herself first. She will be your primary point of contact for getting that information out to the group. Denise, who you got the information from with the city as well, will be your point of contact as it relates to meetings, things like that, and kind of the person who will always have the latest list of participants. But make sure you get that information over. So we do welcome those documents, resources along the way, and I want you to know that that is okay, and feel free to share those things as they make themselves available to you. I also asked about Q&A. Yes, after the introductions, we're going to move into several both discussions and conversations, and all of them we are building in time for a few questions and answers, so feel free to add those comments as they come up. We will do as much of that as time allows, and then the chat feature will remain open throughout the course of the conversation, which will also be both recorded, and we will be aggregating notes from the chat feature as well. So I did want you to know that. That said, let me come back to our team at the city. Kate, I'm going to have you and Matthew say hello first, and then any additional city staff who are on the line who want to say greetings to the group, feel free to go after that.
Okay, everybody, my name is Kate Machado. I am the Deputy Chief of Staff to Mayor Ginther. I cover public safety, human resources, and civil service. I just entered my 28th year of public service. I will be one of the staff people along with Matt Smito, who you'll meet here in a second. So if you have any questions or need information passed along, please let me know at any time. I think most of you have my phone number. If not, I'll make sure you get that. It's great to be on the line with so many talented people. We're lucky that you all have accepted this challenge, and we appreciate your help. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kate. Matt, you want to say hello?
No, thank you. Matt Smito. I work in the Department of Education in the city, but I'm helping Kate and the mayor's team do the staff work on this. So if anybody has any questions on anything, I can get back to you anytime, day or night. Thank you.
And he has been emailing both day and night, so I think that's a true statement, actually, Matthew. So thanks for that. I know, Kim, we're about to hear from you in just a second. If you'd like to say hello, feel free to do that. And then any others that might be on the line, feel free to say hello.
Hello to everyone. And as Mo said, Ken Paul, Chief of Staff to the Mayor, just honored and humbled to work with all of you and inspired and energized to get to work. Have a conversation that's long overdue, but that will make a meaningful and lasting change in our community. So thanks to each and every one of you. You'll hear a little more from me in just a few minutes.
Any others? Just for the sake of transparency, there also. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Hi, my name is Lara Baker Morris, and I'm the Chief Counsel for Columbus City Attorney Klein, and I'm very happy to be here this evening and to be working on these very important challenges and to be the legal advisor when those questions are asked.
And I suspect we will fully utilize your intellectual prowess during the course of this process of what's legal. So thank you, Lara, for being here. Any others need to say hello? All right. With that, I'm going to throw my screen back up in just a second. A couple things that came to mind during the course of that. We want to make sure that you do, if you're not speaking, somebody messaging me, please stay on mute, just because we do pick up a lot of background noise. You probably don't think we're hearing, we actually probably are. So if you would do that for us, that makes our lives a whole lot easier in terms of listening to the group. All right, so we've done that. So here's a couple things I wanted to kind of lift up as it related to your responsibilities in general. The first is We suspect that there will be at least about 6 meetings between now and November. If you do the math on that, that's going to be a fairly aggressive meeting schedule because there is some urgency around this. And so we're hoping that folks will prioritize the meetings, attend all, if possible, of the conversations, and do any kind of interim or pre-reading work that might be assigned between meetings as they come available. But we are expecting at least 6 meetings that could go a little bit more. It really is going to be based on the pace of the group and are we in the right place at that time. But we would like to have at least a final framework sometime during the month of November to be able to start bringing forth the structure and then starting to think about, with the mayor and his team, the actual permanent members of the Civilian Review Board that is to come. So that gives you a sense of what your commitment is. I'm also asking, from an engaging perspective, we want you to be forthright and honest. I don't think that'll be a problem for this group at all in sharing your insights and perspectives. But we wanted to make sure that reminder was there. We want to make sure, though, as a part of that, we're focused on the group's objectives. How is it that we build a strong Civilian Review Board, and what are the things we need to think about in order to do that thoughtfully? And so I'm asking you to think about the group goals ahead of any individual agendas. There are things that we all would like to get done in Columbus, and this may or may not be the forum for those things. I would just ask as a member of the work group, you work as a member of the group and making sure that those the group goals always supersede any of your personal ideas or agendas as a part of that. Part of the reason you're here is that we are really acting as an advisor, and I'll go back to the comment that got made earlier, and you're also the accountability partners for the city. In terms of drafting this, how do we make sure it's legal? How do we make sure that it's thoughtful? How do we make sure it really has some teeth in order to bring about the kinds of reforms that our community is calling for? It's a tall order, and I know that this group will be up to doing that. When you are contributing to the conversation throughout the course of these meetings, I'm going to ask you to think about it from a couple of lenses. One is going to be, it may be good today. Right now, we're in the height of what we're experiencing and the revelations that are coming along with this process. They're not new, perhaps, but they are. Perhaps we are being, our eyes are being open to a number of things for some communities, and that's okay. But as a part of that, we want to make sure you are sharing both and considering things that are both the short-term and the long-term implications of the group. And so how do you make sure we balance that as a part of our conversation becomes really, really important. Obviously, as we meet and deliberate together, we want those to be both positive and future-directed conversations. And so we're thinking about building something now that is to last. And so that means we've got to be thinking about the here and now as well as that futuristic lens. And then finally, we know that our big challenges and order here is to develop recommendations for the charter amendment and basically the work that will come out of that, which will be the Civilian Review Board and the power and structure that it has. And so that is kind of an overview, I think, of what we expected from the work group as it relates to responsibility. Here's a couple thoughts I want to get from you. One of the things we want to do is begin with the end in mind. And so we wanted to ask you up front, in doing that, what are some things that we absolutely must think about as a part of this process? What are things that we need to keep at the forefront? So I'm going to ask you to think about these 3 questions. You can pick up on one or any of them in terms of your response. But I want you to think about, first of all, what is your hope for the work of this group? What is your hope for the work of this group? In other words, when you think about the end of this process, whether that's November, December, or early next year, what do you hope that we would have done and accomplished as a result of you being in these meetings? Secondly, I'm going to ask for any thoughts around, at the end of this process, how will we know we've been successful in developing the right? And I use the word right because that's going to be very relative to this group. But how do we know we developed the right Civilian Review Board for Columbus? And that's intentional as well, because it has to make sure it makes sense for our community. So how do we know we're going to be successful? How will we know when we're successful? What does success look like? And then thirdly, if any of you want to pick up on this thought around what things must we absolutely keep in mind as we do the work that is ahead of us? What must we absolutely keep in mind? In other words, if you had to caution us at the beginning of this process about things to make sure we don't forget about as a result of these meetings and this work group process, What kinds of things would you lift up? The line will be open. The chat feature is also available for you. The floor is open for just a few comments. You don't necessarily need to hear from everyone necessarily, but if you have thoughts around any three of those questions, we'd love to get some of those key considerations out from you now. And I know this group isn't acting shy, so I'll just pause as you gather your thoughts.
As an A, I'll go first. I'm gonna start with, at the end of this work group, I'll know this will be successful when the first police officer is adequately punished for their transgressions. So I think the first time that we go through this process and actually get the results that the community demand, we will know that we have been successful. I hope for this work group that we can build something, Mo, like you said, that lasts, and that we're thoughtful about not only the technical pieces but the human aspect, and how this is going to affect the families who are going to be reaching out to the Civilian Review Board to start this process. And I think things that we need to keep in mind is that we've been convened for a reason. And so I hope that decisions that are made in the mayor's office and at city council that we have an opportunity to look at before they're put out publicly, to make sure that the community has an opportunity to comment on these things. So that's my spiel. Thank you.
Thanks, Jasmine. Any others want to pick up on any one of these three? It doesn't have to be all of them, but feel free to go ahead.
Mo, this is Stephanie Hightower. I want to address the last point. What things must we absolutely keep in mind as we do the work that is ahead of us? And that is that we create a sustainable model that will have real accountability measures attached to it, and that we stay focused. We know that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be criticizing the process and criticizing the thoughts around this table. So staying focused and making sure that we build a sustainable product is what I think we should absolutely keep in mind as we move forward.
Mo?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. My hope for this working group is that we have a lot of expertise, a lot of experiences, and that we don't resort to going to silos. I hope that this group, we can value what each one of us had to say and be inclusive. In other words, I just hope that we can harmonize and work together. And I don't, from people I'm looking at and talking to and seeing that this is a good group. I just hope that we're able to complement each other in the things that we do. We all bring something different to this group. And one of the changes I think that I'll see, that I think that show that we're working, is when we see kids not being afraid of police officers. That's just one of the things I want to work with. But I just hope that we all work with our hearts and our head at the same time.
Yeah, and I agree with Dr. Dodley and all that's been said, but I would add that when I believe this group will be successful when we have fostered a relationship where the police trust the community as well as the community, honors the police for what they do. If we can get to that point, because there's such a disconnect, and where police will stand up for the community and where the community will stand up when they see something wrong. So then if we can foster that relationship, I think we've done something.
That's good. That's good. Thanks, Pastor.
Brother Mo, I got a question.
Yes,
I would. How does this committee work in conjunction with the proposed referendum? To say it another way around, should the referendum fail, where does this committee then stand in that situation?
Fred, I'm going to, question noted. Ken's going to be coming up in just a moment to address the amendment and give you the details of that. And I'm going to ask him to address your question in that, if that's okay. Thank you. Any other thoughts around any of these as we, before we move? Okay. Well, you know, it's important, right? I think, you know, one of the things we want to do is to make sure we understand, and you all give us some great feedback, but make sure we understand at the beginning of this process, what does success look like for you? I mean, you're giving your time, you're representing, all of you have perspective and constituencies you are representing, and so it's really important that we hear from you around what does success of this group look like, and then what are some of those pitfalls that we want to make sure we avoid as we go into the process. So while we're going to move on in the discussion today, that conversation is not closed. As they come up for you at subsequent meetings or other parts of the conversation, feel free to bring those back, because we do want to make sure we are being responsive to the group as well as responsive to the charge that the group is coming together around. So both of those are critically important, and thank you for those who shared in that process. Just to talk a little bit about the mechanics of our meetings together, these will be pretty quick. So there are some features that we'll be able to use at various parts during the course of these meetings. Obviously, you know that you have both individual and group chat options if you have the WebEx downloaded. That will allow you to actually type any responses you want, or if you're having audio issues. Again, the chat is being recorded as well or monitored, and we will be able to pull those down. Similar to if we were together in a meeting and you want to lean over to your neighbor and whisper something, you do have the individual chat feature as well. So you can talk to individual members of the work group offline, and those conversations are not recorded and they are not a part of the transcript for the group, so you know that. In addition to that, we may at some points during meetings other than today, we may utilize polling features. We may utilize the breakout features as a part of that. There is also in the chat box, there is a raise hand feature. So if for whatever reason, you know, I'm asking a question or you want to get into the conversation and can't get in there, feel free to use the raise hand feature. My colleagues at the city are monitoring the chat as well, and they will let me know if I need to recognize someone from the raise hand feature as well. So just know those are available to you. In addition, just to stay muted when you're not speaking. Obviously, it's the best practice on these type of meetings. We do pick up a lot of background noise, and just also know that meetings are being recorded and live broadcast to our community. So we want to make sure you get reminded of those things, and we're going to have a little bit more on the open meetings piece of this in just a moment. So here are, you know, my rules of engagement for you, and they are similar to probably other sessions you've been in with me if we've had the opportunity to work together before. One, I want to make sure everyone speaks, and so I don't oftentimes do round robin type discussions. You don't feel compelled to speak on the issue, but I do want to make sure we have heard from every voice during the course of the conversation. So if there is, you know, some of you who are a little more vocal, there might be times where I ask you to hold a comment or to let someone else go who we haven't heard from as much. I do want to make sure that the conversation is as balanced as possible. At the same time, I want you all to feel free to fully participate in the meeting. As a function of that, I may, if I have not heard from you, just know I may say, hey, what do you think, you know, Ken, or anybody else is on the call, and hopefully you are willing to respond when called on in those instances. It's kind of kindergarten rules, but it does not go without saying, so we will say it. We do want to respect everyone, their opinions. We're not looking for you all to think with one mind here. In fact, that is the beauty of this group. I just want to make sure we keep a level of respect for folks and their opinions, agree to disagree on points of policy, and at the same time, we will commit to not being disagreeable as a part of that process. We will, when I talk about being on time, that's not only at the beginning of a meeting, but we do want to make sure there will be breaks during the course of certain meetings. I will always give you a time to be back. I'm just going to ask that you come back together at that time. If we were together in a physical setting, everybody knows my rules around being late coming back, which means you have to sing, dance, and tell a joke if you're late from a break. But I'll have to relax that a little bit in the course of this conversation, but I'll think of something by the time we're all done in November. So just know, but again, try to be on time so we can stay as efficient as possible. Again, debate is okay. It's okay that we don't agree. We're not here to be a killer of somebody else's idea. We want to make sure we get everything on the table, we fully evaluate them, and if it's not the course of action we believe we want to have, perfectly okay. There may also be times where I exercise the parking lot feature, where we are having a conversation and we need to defer to another issue, or we need to move on from something. I will ask for something to be added to the parking lot. My team is on the call to make sure we're taking down those particular points, and we will either bring them back later in the conversation, or they will serve as an input to future agendas for future meetings. So I may ask at certain points and say, hey, let's talk about that. Probably can't get into it now. Let's put it in the parking lot and bring it back before we either adjourn or at the next meeting. And then, I don't want you to be doing anything. As important as this issue is, I want to make sure you enjoy this experience, and so that you have the full opportunity to participate as a part of this. But I want to make sure this is also not torture for you to be a part of this process, even though we can't all be physically together. So certainly anything that I can do or others can do to help facilitate a better process, we are certainly open to doing that as much as possible. That is all of my ground rule stuff. Any questions just about process, any of that kind of stuff before we jump into some reminders around the open meetings pieces and some guidelines you need to be responsive to there. Any process, rules of engagement questions from the group? All right, thumbs up, good to go? All right. All right, next up then, I'm going to turn it to, I'll have your slides here. Lara Baker Morris, who you heard from earlier, she's going to start off by overviewing just kind of some guidelines, keeping in mind these are public meetings and they are being recorded, so some things you want to make sure that you are cognizant of as a part of these deliberations. Lara?
Thank you, Mo. I think you actually just summarized my entire presentation. These are an open meetings. This is being recorded. I wanted to thank everybody for participating in this, and I wanted to just give a very brief overview of the open meetings requirements. This is a public body. That means that this advisory group is meeting together pursuant to Columbus City Charter. The members are appointed by an officer of the city, and therefore this is a public body, and that means that and that means that we do have to comply with open meetings requirements as are spelled out in the Ohio Revised Code and in the Columbus City Code. So what does that mean? A public body is the committee itself, as well as any subcommittees that public body might set up. And what it means is that all public bodies must conduct their business in meetings that are open to the public. So that's the basics of it. If you're a public body, you must conduct your business in meetings that are open to the public. Now I'll get down to the really boring, lawyer aspect of that. What is a meeting? A meeting is a prearranged gathering of a majority of members of the public body. So in this case, there are, I believe, 16 members of the work group, which means that in order to constitute a quorum or a majority, you have to have 9. So in order to have a public meeting, in order to vote on anything, you would need 9 people present. If you're not voting, if you're just discussing things, you can gather certainly, and you still want to be cognizant of the fact that you might be creating public records. You might have documents that are going to become a public record. But in order to actually engage in anything, to make recommendations on the part of the commission, to vote on anything, you need that quorum. You need 9 people. So it's a prearranged gathering. Well, what does that mean? This is obviously a prearranged gathering. We're together on a virtual conference call. You're going to be here. There was a notification that has to come out, and that does need to be noticed. You need to let the public know that we're going to be getting together, and we're all going to meet and discuss these issues. So if you run into 8 other members of your committee when you're out, well, that's not going to happen right now, right? But if you're right, in normal times, if you ran into 8 other people when you're out and about, do you suddenly have a meeting? No. But if you planned to meet one another to discuss something related to what this group is being brought together to do, then you might very well have a meeting that needs to then be open to the public, and notice needs to be provided so that the public can attend. So again, if you run into one another, you're watching the same concert, back, again, when we can do that again, you run into someone at the park, not a problem. But if you then start to discuss matters that this group was gathered together to discuss, you're discussing now the business of it, or if you decided to meet together to discuss the business of the working group, you now probably have a meeting, which means you must have told the public, provide notice, and it must be open to the public so they can observe and attend. It's important to note that you're talking about whether or not you are discussing public business when you're in that meeting. So just the fact, again, that you're gathered together doesn't mean that you have an open meetings violation if you haven't pre-planned it, but this is where this comes up the biggest. So now you're all getting to know one another, you're part of this working group, you develop friendships, and maybe somebody sends out a group email, right? And so if you're getting a group email from like Kate Pashotti regarding the information that you're supposed to be looking at as part of this working group, that's fine. But what happens when you then reply to all and you start discussing the materials? Now you've got a problem, because now you've got a group, it's probably more than the quorum, you're discussing the matters of the business, so you have to be very careful about that. On the other hand, you know, if you decide to send out a copy of your favorite recipe or your favorite TV show or you know, something along those lines, and you happen to send it to all the members that are in your working group, well, you're not discussing the business of the working group when you're doing that, so you're probably okay. Again, just keep it very simple. Public body getting together to discuss the business of the public body, got to provide notice, got to be open to the public. At the bottom of this, and this will be included, I believe that you're going to get a copy of what I provided here so you can go back and reference it at various points in time. Mo will mostly take care of the notice requirements, letting the public know when we're meeting and the fact that you have to tell them 24 hours ahead of time. You may at some point be able to go into executive session. It's not likely to happen with this group, but there are specific reasons, very limited reasons, that you can go into what's called an executive session, which is a more private portion of a meeting. One of those reasons might be if there is contemplated litigation and you need to talk with your lawyer. That's one of the reasons you can go in executive session. That's probably not going to come up a lot with this particular group. Most of the things that you're being asked to do are things that would happen in the open meeting within the public view. That also does discourage then secret ballot, whispering of public business, or round robin discussions. So what does that mean? That's where, you know, you email another group member to discuss an issue, and then you email a third group member, and then it keeps going like playing a game of telephone. Now, effectively, you've created a meeting that's not an open meeting. So again, just bring all the information about the business that you're going to conduct to the open meeting, have good dialogue here. Make sure to use the chat features. Those are going to be maintained as a public record, again, if they're part of the group chat. And that's the way to discuss that so that everyone can see what the deliberations are. Meeting minutes must be kept. Mo, I think you're probably, or someone on your staff is taking care of that component. But it is just out there that does have to happen, generally talking about what the group talked about. And then on the last page here, current emergency measures. So the General Assembly, because of COVID-19, passed emergency provisions that altered the open meetings laws. So the general open meetings laws for the Ohio Revised Code is that you have to do all of this in person. Well, obviously we can't do that right now. So the General Assembly passed some emergency legislation that allows you to do this in this virtual format. I want you to know that the Department of Technology for the city has put together this WebEx that will comport with the requirements of the General Assembly. And it's just, again, keeping in mind that you have to have the ability to interact with one another using the kind of technology so that the people observing this can see it the same way that you as members participating in the meeting are interacting with it. In other words, if you're doing a video conference, then the public needs to be able to see the video of it. If you're only meeting by phone, if that were to set up, if you're going to have an open meeting by phone, that is allowable, but the public must also then participate, which makes that a little bit more complicated, which is why we tend to use WebEx. That is the basic gist of open meetings. Again, all of this has been provided to you that you can go over and read at your leisure. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about is public records. So because this is an open public body, because this is an open meeting, you are now generating public records. If you are communicating with one another about issues that pertain to the business of this work group, you are probably creating a public record. It doesn't matter what form that takes. If you pass somebody a note, if you create a memo, if you write an email, if you text somebody, and you're doing that, and it's not just an incidental, like, hey, meet me in 5 minutes kind of text, but it's substantive. It's about the working group. It's about maybe the kind of citizen review board that you want to have, or a particular aspect of that review board. And you're doing it as part of your working group, and you're communicating it with one another. That is potentially creating a public record, and it needs to be maintained. So that's the gist of my spiel here regarding open meetings and public records, and I'm open to any kind of questions along those lines. But again, the idea is to be transparent and to be able to be observed by the public in your deliberations.
Questions around open meeting rules or any of the like from the group? I want to make sure you all are comfortable here as well.
Hey, Mo, Jasmine had a question. Do the public records rules apply to the staff? And the answer is yes, right, City Attorney?
That is correct.
I'm sorry, so just to clarify, like, we're not allowed as a group to have side conversations about this particular business that we're discussing, but does that also mean that, like, staff can't have side conversations about this kind of stuff, or does this only apply specifically to our group?
Okay, so there are allowed to be some side conversations as long as you don't have a quorum of people gathering together. So if there are two people just having a conversation about your work, that's not necessarily problematic. The problem would be if you had 9, because there are 16 members, if you had 9 or more gathering together and you didn't then provide notice and the public opportunity to be heard, then you would have an issue. Staff are not part of the commission. We're not part of the public body. We have other requirements upon us in terms of public record and potentially open meetings if we serve in a different capacity. But the open meetings laws themselves specifically apply to public bodies and not necessarily just employees of the public entity.
Thank you for the question, Jasmine. Any others around this topic? All right. I did not want you to start this process without fully understanding all of that, because sometimes we take it for granted and then it comes back to bite us later. So again, I thank you for sharing that. And then obviously she will be as a part of this meeting. If a question specifically comes up, we certainly can entertain that as it comes up. All right. With that said, let's jump into. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just going to say very quickly, I'm going to go off video, but I'm staying on the call because my iPad is starting to die. But I'm still here.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right. All right, folks, with that, we're going to move into a series of discussion items. The first of being the overview of the charter amendment. Chief of Staff Ken Paul is going to come and lay out the amendment overview, kind of what the scope of this group or the scope of the actual amendment itself would do if passed in November, and also address Attorney Benton's question about the work of this group in relation to if that amendment was to fail. So with that, Ken?
Thanks, Mo, and thanks to each one of you. I'll try and not be redundant and work through these slides quickly, but if you have any questions, stop me, or certainly we'll give the opportunity to address those questions at the end. But as you know, Mayor Ginther announced that we'd be putting an amendment to the Columbus City Charter on the ballot this November to establish a civilian review board. The language was crafted, legislation drafted, and an ordinance was approved by Columbus City Council just a week ago yesterday. And the final legislation, the charter amendment itself, the ballot language, all of that will be shared with this group. We can do so after this meeting. I believe Mo has it, but it's also available via the city's website, and it'll be on the dedicated web page that we established for this group. When it gets to the board, where it's actually been submitted to the Board of Elections, by mid-August, they will assign an issue number to it. Right now, city issues are expected to be first on the ballot, and this issue is looking to be issue 2. So just a note for that as you look forward to the November. To Attorney Benton's question about what would happen if that ballot issue fails. Now, We have no intention of that happening, but in the event that it does not diminish the work of this group. We can still move forward and establish the Civilian Review Board. Much of the powers and many of the things that we'll be talking about as a group will have to be negotiated with the police union, regardless of whether a charter amendment is approved or not. We believe the charter amendment will help our case at the bargaining table. And additionally, as Ms. Hightower pointed out, it assures that no one can undo the work of this group and undo the will of the people without another vote. So that is the reason why we're pushing forward with the charter amendment. We'll hit a few more reasons here in a second, but for the purpose of this conversation, want to make sure that we do a quick level set. Everybody understands what the charter amendment does and what it doesn't do. First off, at a very high level, the charter amendment provides the foundation for the work of this group, establishes the fact that there will be an independent board created. It will have the ability to initiate investigations and the ability to compel evidence with some limitations and request subpoenas. It will also allow the Civilian Review Board to make recommendations on discipline, and it creates the Department of the Inspector General and assures that the body will be funded and staffed. That is an issue. In a few minutes, Ron Mills will address best practices, models from across the country, and frankly, civilian review boards are not a new concept. Many have been around since the 80s, but I will tell you in doing some initial research, there are a lot of civilian review boards that have simply been defunded over time, and they've been stripped of their power. And it's another reason why the charter amendment is important to assure that that doesn't happen. It's actually in the language in the charter amendment to assure that annual funding is kept, and explains what has to happen if that funding were ever to be reduced. So important things to consider as we move forward. So it does all this. You may ask the question, well, if we're doing a charter amendment, why is this group getting together? Answer again, fairly straightforward. The charter amendment lays the foundation, but the work that you are doing will build the structure of the review board and help determine how it will function based on national best practices and community input. And as significant as the charter amendment is, there are many areas where the amendment is silent, and that was intentional. And that's where your work comes in. I will underscore, and Ron will get to this point. Ron Linville represents Baker Hostetler. He'll be presenting in just a few minutes, but he's also the attorney who works with us in negotiating with the FOP, the police union. Our contracts has a real profound knowledge of our contract and can help this group understand what it can and can't do and what we may be able to accomplish either through negotiations or what we may need to work through legislative power or figure out how to way to leverage this charter amendment to back our position. But I do hope and expect that the charter amendment will help us at the bargaining table. And again, Ron can speak to that a little bit later on. So we talked a little bit about what the board will do. We'll talk about what it doesn't do. Amendment does not speak to how the board will be appointed, how many people will be seated, how long they'll serve, how they'll be replaced or removed if necessary. It's also silent on board structure and governance. There's no language in the charter amendment about how complaints will be received, how investigations will be handled. The language around compelling evidence, witnesses, and subpoenas will likely need to be strengthened, and we're going to look to this group to make recommendations on how we might do that. Certainly the city attorney's office is going to be invaluable as we have that conversation. Something that is part of the charter amendment is affording the board the opportunity to make recommendations on discipline, but what it doesn't do is give the authority to levy discipline independent of the division of police. And that's something that this board may want to consider. There are models from across the country where civilian review boards actually have the authority to issue discipline. It's not as common, and it poses some challenges, and it would have to be negotiated. But that's the type of thing that we would look to this board to come up with a recommendation on. Charter amendment also doesn't speak to the staffing or budget of the inspector general or the board. So this group will need to look at best practices from across the country and determine, a framework for what that looks like, so that we can put forward a budget that makes sure that this body is funded to be able to fulfill their mission. These are some of the questions that remain. There are likely many more that we will come across as we continue this conversation. Before we hand it back to Mo, who will toss it to Ron to talk about some best practices from across the country, I do want to go to the final slide, and that's just to put a finer point on the scope that the mayor shared at the beginning. It's there in front of you in black and white, and something to come back to later as we work through this process. But, questions you should be thinking about in between this meeting and the next. What does this board look like in terms of who should be on it? How do we go about appointing the members? How long should they serve? Should we have term limits? And what would we need to do if we needed to replace somebody along the way? How do we strengthen the Civilian Review Board's authority to compel evidence and to call witnesses, and to make sure that when they're conducting investigations that they have all the power they need to come to a recommendation? And when it comes to recommendations, what do we need to do to make sure that either the chief of police follows the board's recommendations in terms of discipline? Gets to Jasmine's point that officers are disciplined appropriately for their behavior. How do we assure that that happens? And does that require us to actually find a way to negotiate, the power to issue discipline independently? And that will require bargaining, which is that next point there, to inform and to bolster our city's collective bargaining position, and show the will of the people, and the voices of this board are supportive of changes to the contract. And then along the way, I know full well that as much thought that went into this process at the front, at the beginning of the process, we missed something. And so I hope that this group can help identify gaps where we've fallen short or we've got a blind spot, and to make sure that we have a full and robust discussion around those points, and that we come away with recommendations that help steer us moving forward. Hopefully this sets some expectations. Happy to answer any questions you might have. Timeline, we are looking to have a pretty solid framework in place over the next 90 days, and certainly a clear enough picture of what the Civilian Review Board will look like and how it will function, so that we can seat that first review board by the end of this year. I'll stop there and toss it back to Mo.
I know there may be some questions on the group. Let me ask you, do you want to hear the national landscape stuff before we go to Q&A here, or if you have questions for Ken, would you like to jump in now?
I'm looking at some of the chat comments and questions that I think I can address. There is still time to make change to the structure of the Civilian Review Board. Frankly, there's not anything that the charter really limits us from doing. It's really intended to be the framework. And then I did mention limitations to the ability to compel evidence, to subpoena. I will tell you, Laura Baker can talk to us, and I expect she will at a future meeting. It is probably the focus of a big chunk, if not an entire meeting moving forward. But those limitations come through the contract and really are rooted in state labor law, in the sense that when it comes to discipline under state labor law, it is a item that must be negotiated. So while we can challenge that notion and perhaps take that to court if the police unions not willing to work with us to figure out how to provide the powers the review board needs, we do need to attempt to negotiate it, and it will be subject to bargaining. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I can assure you we will talk much more about those limitations as the work of this group carries forward. And certainly if Laura Baker wants to chime in, or Ron, who represents us in collective bargaining, may want to address that, certainly feel free to jump in.
And then, Ken, I also see this question from Jonathan. Could the Civilian Review Board influence the use of force policy and the training of officers? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, certainly this group can weigh in on any topic, but getting back to Mo, what you sort of charged us with at the beginning and staying focused on the mission at hand, it doesn't mean that we can't have opinions or thoughts or suggestions. And frankly, there is another body that has been set up. It's the Chiefs Advisory Panel that will be specifically looking at use of force policy and making recommendations to the chief. There's no reason why this body cannot communicate its will or opinion or desire to that group, which is a separate charge. That group won't be impacting this work, but my guess is if the Chiefs Advisory Panel that we assembled has some thoughts that they'd like to share with this body, we would welcome it. And so the same is true, vice versa. But really the focus on this group is going to be standing up the Civilian Review Board. Hopefully that answers the question.
Laura, looks like I saw your hand too. Go ahead.
I did it right. So I will briefly answer the question. Ken is right. I could probably talk for hours about subpoena power limitations, and you'd all be asleep. I'd put myself to sleep. But the general issue is that a city does not have the authority to expand the jurisdiction of a court. And what that means is that we cannot, when I hear about subpoena powers, it's about the ability to hold somebody in contempt or to have a court hold them in contempt for failing to provide information. We're very much limited in our ability to have that occur. That doesn't mean that we can't do things within the city. And what the Charter Review Amendment has proposed is a framework for where we could use city powers in order to assure that information is provided to the Citizen Review Board. For instance, if the document you're seeking is a city document, we can assure that that kind of information is provided to the review board. Where it gets more difficult and challenging is that the document that you're seeking is something the city itself does not control. A great example of that would be, for instance, a civilian was in an interaction involving a police officer, and that civilian took video on their phone of the interaction. Would we have the ability as a city to compel that civilian to turn over that video? And that's where the challenges arise. And as Ken said, that's something we will discuss much more in depth at a future meeting, but that just gives you a flavor of why there are complicated issues involved regarding the subpoena power.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Laura.
All right, we're going to move into looking at how this work is being done in other communities. This is really background and backdrop for the conversation. I hear a comment there. Go ahead.
Oh,
I thought I heard a comment. Sorry.
You asking me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I did have a question.
Okay.
I believe it was announced today that Reynoldsburg has passed a ordinance or some measure to establish their civilian review board. Do we know what that compares with what we're proposing here?
Yeah, I saw that also, and I will tell you, I don't think that would have happened but for this group and for our collective push to ensure that Columbus has a civilian review board. I don't think that would have occurred. Frankly, Central Ohio, Columbus has been having a conversation about a civilian review board for a long time. That said, what we're looking for is a civilian review board that has more substantial power than perhaps what was agreed to Reynoldsburg and the FOP. There are certainly components of that agreement that this group is likely going to recommend we move forward with, and that we might be able to do without negotiating, and frankly without a charter amendment. But there are likely things that our community, that this group will be asking for, that cannot be achieved through negotiations alone. And I think on the chat, Jasmine hit it on the head. A lot of teeth is what's missing in the Reynoldsburg agreement. But nevertheless, it is a step forward, and don't want to discount that. But it's likely short of where we hope this group ends up. Hopefully that answers the question.
It does.
Thank you. All right, Ron, we're going to come to you if you're going to share a screen from there, and then he's going to give us an overview of the national landscape around these issues and allow you to kind of think about what other cities are doing, all as, again, input and backdrop to understanding your charge and the work that's ahead of us here. Ron?
Thank you very much, Mo. And thanks again to the mayor and Ken and Kate for putting this group together and taking the lead. And I've been on the call since the beginning, and I appreciate the opportunity to hear everyone's background and in insights. And it is obviously a really strong group. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So just to give you a little background about me, I'm a management labor lawyer, which means that I represent employers or cities or counties or represent the transit agency in their relationships with their unions. And I've been very lucky to work with the city of Columbus on their bargaining issues since the mid-90s. So I've probably negotiated 6 or 7 cycles of bargaining with the city's unions, including the FOP. Obviously, as Ken just mentioned, the work that you're going to do is going to, at some places and points, probably bump into the labor contract that the city has with the FOP, and you're very lucky to have Laura as your legal counselor. She is very knowledgeable about all of that. I'm happy to help if you need me at any point in time. But there are places where the labor contract specifically deals with issues like discipline. And obviously there are other places where there may be a bargaining obligation. So as this group does its work, you'll have to navigate some of that, but you've got lots of resources to help you do that. The main thrust, I think, of what Mo asked me to do is to talk a little bit about the national landscape and other civilian review boards. I will tell you that as you dig into this, the best practices, how other major cities have done it is going to be very, very important to you. And I would echo what Ken said, and that is that although many, actually I think Columbus is the only major city that does not have a civilian review board or civilian oversight in the country. But as you go through that, even though some of them may have been funding has been cut, funding has been impacted, they will still be a very good model for you to look at and look at the best practices. So when this all kind of started months ago, we, as we have done periodically, we did a little survey of our own, the law firm did, and we looked at the 17 largest cities in the United States, plus we looked at Baltimore, and Baltimore is 23, I think, in the country. And the reason we picked that group was to get a sense of what the major metropolitan areas are doing. Somebody mentioned Reynoldsburg, and that's awesome that they are also doing a civilian review board. The difference between their operations and the 1,900 plus officers in the city of Columbus would be significant. And so, I would recommend that you look at other large metropolitan areas when you're looking for best practices in this area. And so we focused on the 17 largest plus Baltimore. It seemed to us that would be a good sample. How we organized our research was by the functions that those civilian review boards took on. And there is a wide range of functions. You know, many of you have already expressed some opinions on things like the ability to compel attendance or subpoena or discipline, etc. But there's a large variety of functions that those civilian review boards take on. And I'm going to just kind of give you an overview of those. My guess is at some point in your work, you're going to want to devote a much greater amount of time to looking at the other civilian review board documents and how they're structured. But the main functions that kind of pop out at you as you do that, one is investigative, the ability to investigate, and that is to conduct independent investigations of complaints about actions by police officers or the police department. Another one is to review or monitor, and that's where you review the action that's been taken by the other departments. I just saw a chat. I do have a document that I'll provide to the group. It's both a chart, so when you get to this point, you'll have it, as well as a more detailed listing of all the powers and duties of the various cities. I thought it's pretty busy to put on a screen right now, so I thought it would be better just to give you an overview, and then you all can look at it on your own, but you'll have it. Next is the ability to audit police department investigations, to adjudicate discipline, to deal with appeals by citizens, to many civilian review boards advise on policy and operations. And I know here, as Ken mentioned, there's a couple other groups that are working on some of those issues. Some, not many, also unilaterally have the ability to change policy for the police department or operational policy. Subpoenas we've already talked about. Some have the ability to mediate disputes between either the citizenry or the department. They act as liaisons. They do community outreach. They do reporting, annual, semi-annual reporting, or they are involved in some way with the hiring to make sure that the hiring is more diverse, more appropriate for the makeup of the population they serve. So that's a quick overview of those kind of functions. And again, it may be that you all decide that you want to look at functions as you are kind of deciding what your civilian review board recommendations will be. Just to give you a little bit of a sense on a national scope, the two most common functions of that group that I just talked about 75% of them review police department internal affair investigations. So if you're looking for a place to dig in, that's where a number of your peer groups would do. And about 70% of those adjudicate police misconduct. That's an issue that would have some bargaining ramifications, but in many of those disciplinary recommendations are just that. They're recommendations, not final decisions. About 2/3 of those boards provide advisory recommendations with respect to changes in policy, etc. And again, where that fits in with the Chiefs Council is something for you all to sort out. They report 2/3 report out. Only about 20% of those civilian review boards have audit power, and that's likely because most of them want to have something stronger, more impactful than just the ability to audit. About half do citizen mediations, and the majority of those do have some community outreach or liaison function that they serve, helping the community and as a liaison with the police department. Interestingly, very few of those boards are very active in the hiring of sworn officers in police departments. And in most of those situations, that's trying to improve the process and make recommendations about the process. And so that, again, I was asked to comment for about 10 or 15 minutes. This is obviously something that will take a lot of time to dig through and is just a wealth of information for you to start picking and choosing what ideas you believe your recommendations would have. And again, as you do that, staying close to what impact your suggestions might have in terms of the labor contract or the duty to bargain is also going to be important. There are some things you'll be able to do very quickly and some things that will require us to go to the table and bargain. I think that in the current environment and with the groundwork that the mayor and his staff have put together, we're in as good a situation as we can be for that bargaining. And I agree with Ken. I think the charter amendment, which seems to me to be very, very well called for and supported, will help in that effort, I'm hoping. So, Mo, I'm happy to answer questions. I was, I'm not able to look at the chats and speak at the same time, but I'm happy if there are some questions. And before I finish, shout out to Fred Benton, who was one of my classmates in law school. So nice to see you. It's been a while, but good to see you.
We're making connections today. Very good, very good. So you may have questions for Ron. I think it goes without saying there's a lot to unpack, and you don't have the document in front of you yet. That will be gotten to you, and so I imagine you may want to get Ron back at certain intervals to be able to hit highlights as you want to walk through that information. But I did see the comments in the chat that you would prefer to see that, which, we will work through that piece. But any initial questions for Ron, knowing that he will be an ongoing resource for us as the conversation goes on, but any initial thoughts today from his work nationally and looking at these other cities?
I'm sorry, I think I have two questions possibly. One's clarifying. So, Ron, you are the person that actually negotiates on behalf of the city of Columbus with the FOP?
I am.
And what is different about this time, and what have you learned over the years about how we can possibly push the FOP to actually agree to some common sense reforms? Because it seems like in the past they've not been willing to do that. And so I'm wondering if you've changed your strategy or if something is just different about this particular moment in time.
I would say a little of both probably. Once Mayor Ginther took office, and I worked for 16 years with Mayor Coleman, and we were able to achieve some change. I don't have time really to get into it now, but I'm happy to spend as much time as the group would like. The process, the law under which you bargain in Ohio makes change difficult because it goes to an independent, neutral, an arbitrator if you can't reach agreement at the table, and that sometimes is difficult to achieve change. But we've made some progress, and then Mayor Ginther charged us with making incremental change over the next 3 cycles of the contract. I'd be happy to share with the group if they'd like to see it. We made some significant changes last cycle in things like discipline, citizen complaints, the time period for citizens to file complaints, those kinds of things. So I think that part of it is focus and priority. And I also think that the current environment is such that the FOP understands that change is coming and change is something they're going to have to deal with.
Thank you, Ron.
Oh, you're welcome.
Any other initial questions for Ron? All right. I suspect you will be invited back, Ron, so don't definitely take us up on our next invitation as well.
You bet, whenever you need it. Thank you all. I've got to go now, but I appreciate very much the opportunity to be with you.
Thank you, sir. To the group, we have about 15 minutes remaining in our allotted time. I think we can get there. I'm going to ask if you're able to power through this 15 minutes. We will not take the break if you need it. We can take 5 minutes. I'll just do thumbs up if you want to keep powering through. If you need the break, just thumbs down will be fine, and we can do either. I think I'm seeing all thumbs up, I believe. Okay. All right, folks, I know this is more tedious on virtual format, so thanks for hanging in there with us. All right, a couple more things we need to just talk through really quickly, and then that will be kind of some facilitated discussion around 3 quick points before we close today's kind of orientation meeting. The first is we need to talk a little bit about our meeting cadence and schedule. Again, we're not going to pull out calendars, that stuff today, but we do want to remind you we are probably thinking about a cadence of a 2 to 3 week interval between meetings. And Kate and Matt, stop me if I say anything incorrectly. We want to make sure we are in a good position by November to make a solid set of recommendations. And not knowing what we don't know already, we are erring on the side of more, let's meet more frequently early on, and then we can taper them off perhaps as the process moves on if we're a little further along than we need to be. So with that said, there is, I'll just kind of cast the net widely. If there are, this time of day was kind of the end of the workday, but not quite. Let me first of all start there. You can use the chat feature. Is there any challenges with the kind of 4 to 6 time frame, or do you have alternative time frames? Keeping in mind there is city staff involved too who work pretty long days as well, but we want to balance that out, and we'll do whatever works. So don't overstate that. But any challenges with the 4 to 6 timeline as a general sense, or would you like to see something different?
Hey, Mo, this is Stephanie. I think, can I just suggest that you guys come up with that cadence, and then we can respond that way, because everybody's probably extremely busy. So whatever you think the best cadence is, I think that would probably be the best way to do it. And we'll make it work. I mean.
All right. I can probably pretty much tell you we will stay away from Mondays with all that happening in the city on Mondays, including city council. And we're probably going to be staying away from Friday evening. So those two, you're probably talking about the center part of your week. And we will work with you to develop a schedule at least for the next couple of meetings, and then see where we are from there. Kate, is that a fair approach at this point?
That sounds great.
Okay. All right, so with no objections then, we'll move forward, kind of looking at the Tuesday to Thursday kind of a span. I think I'm seeing at least a couple saying Tuesday work pretty well. Also saw Friday mornings is also a good time. So no later than Friday morning would probably be the latest in the week we would go, but we'll play it around. And if you have flexibility, if you're like me and it's just based on your calendar, it does not have to be a consistent Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. It can be just based on the week. We can set dates according to some level of availability, but it's hard to get everybody together with this many people. So I will leave that to the team at the city. Kate and Denise will coordinate on that, get you out some initial thoughts around dates, but I wanted to make sure we could stay in this time frame. It sounds like there's no major objections to the 4 to 6 kind of time frame. Once, twice. All right, we're sold on that part. All right, last couple thoughts I want to get from you. Just around some closing items, we kind of start to plan for future meetings. The first is really looking at, there we go. So today you got a chance to hear a couple of topics. One was around what was needed or what are other cities doing as it relates to the Civilian Review Board. And so you heard a little content there. You also got an overview of the Civilian Review Board actual legislation that is moving towards the ballot. First question I'll ask you to think about is, are there other topics based on today's conversations of the work that you have ahead of you that you feel like, hey, Mo, I don't know enough about this, or I need to know more about this particular topic area? We're going to get you Ron's information to overview those cities, but any other points of information or clarity you'd like us to address in future meetings? So help us to kind of build the education part of your agenda moving forward. Are there other topics we need to be thinking about to bring you more insight or information around, is my first question. And you can, Janae, go ahead.
So one thing, listening to Ron kind of give the brief overview of the collective bargaining process, I would say more information, more detailed information about exactly kind of the past challenges that they've had at the negotiation table and exactly how the process works for negotiations, the give and take, and what can be done. Because I think we could create the best civilian review board from a function or structure standpoint, but if we can't actually get to the table and negotiate on those points, it's going to be really hard to implement. And so I think knowing where those limitations are would be really helpful if you could do kind of an educational conversation about that.
Okay. Hear you on that. And one of the things we also plan to do is to look at all of our decision points that are to come. So things like tenure of the board, responsibilities, those things, and really, kind of build a matrix of sorts in terms of are there decisions that we pretty much can make, or will they require negotiation at the table? So that will also kind of inform, I think, the conversation you're asking for as well. So that is a plan of ours to bring that to you as well. Other thoughts around additional learning topics or things you need to know more about?
Hey, Mo, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Just access, will we be able to access or at least be able to look at SOPs, in particular IA's SOPs? Also how the internal investigative process or the chain of command initiated investigations, will they be a part of this? And the last one is access to the discipline tracking system, which is how a lot of discipline is determined in the division. Will we be able to review that at a high level so that everyone gets an idea of how discipline is decided right now by the division?
So really a kind of an overview of what the current practices are, how the decision made, who's involved, that kind of stuff. I think is what I'm hearing from you, Anthony. Kate or Matt, you guys want to weigh into that or punt to the appropriate person?
Mr. Wilson, if we could kind of talk offline so I get a better idea of what you're asking for, that would be great.
Okay. I think generally speaking, though, it's the disciplinary process and how it unfolds, and trying to learn more about that. And maybe not. Yeah. I don't hear you saying specific to a case. I hear you saying a general overview of how this decision is made. How do we sanction officers for misconduct? Those kind of things. Am I hearing you?
Yeah, and Mo, this is Ken. I think for the first two, we can definitely get a presentation in terms of how the process exists now and how discipline is given. I think the pause that Kate and I both have not talking about is I'm not sure how we track that, those disciplinary decisions and how we would go about representing that information. But if we can get that, we will. It may be a challenge, but we can certainly give a presentation to the group about how discipline and how investigations are completed today.
And the third point turns out to be something we need to strengthen and become kind of work of this group to see, to design what it is we recommend going forward.
That may be a recommendation, frankly. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have a comment. Yes. I'd like to know, back in 2018, there was a Columbus Community Safety Advisory Committee. I'd like to know if we can get an overview of what's happening with that committee and some of the recommendations. I know they looked extensively into police training and all the things that they do, but I'm not sure. And I thought that would be good information if we find out what they did, because that safety commission, I think, would help us establish a review board. I don't know what your findings were.
So
if I'm hearing
if I may,
Dr. Dial, go ahead.
By the end of this week, there should be a forward-facing dashboard that will have all of the recommendations from the Safety Advisory Commission, as well as the recommendations from the matrix study that was done of Columbus Police on an outward-facing dashboard that you can access that will show where they are in the recommendation, if it's been implemented, and if it hasn't been implemented, why it hasn't been implemented. And it's very comprehensive dashboard, very easy to follow. And I think that you'll be surprised at how many of the recommendations have already been implemented. I think that might be a good first place to start. And then if there's something that we need to dig a little further down into, then maybe we could have a presentation, but that would be up to you.
Oh, okay. All right. I just didn't know how to even access that information, but you just told me. Thank you.
I'm also wondering if Ron's information around the 17 cities that they were sort of looking at for their civilian review board, if they outlined the most commonly seen infractions by officers, and also which ones don't they see that kind of go unseen, because I think that that'll be really good for us to look at common infractions, and for the folks on here who once were in law enforcement, I think it'd be really great for you to also help us see what we don't see, right? What happens behind the scenes that we should be thinking about.
Can we get everyone else to mute, please? Good. Were you done with your comments? Sorry, I think we needed to do this.
Well, Tesla is not an injection or cream.
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so noted on that, additional slice of the information from Ron and his team is necessary. So we will start to work with him around giving you some additional insight into that other city data, what's there and what's not there is what I heard you talk about, as relates to infractions particularly. Other thoughts? Additional learning opportunities, go ahead.
I would like to know about if any civilian review boards have the ability to reach out to the federal government. So if you're not getting compliance within your own city, what are sort of the steps that need to be taken to contact the Justice Department or the FBI? And then also, can we get a list of everybody's like name, phone number, and email address?
Yes. Latter that will follow this meeting. First point noted in terms of the authority of those existing civil review boards have in terms of kicking things up to the federal level for further investigation. Noted. All right. Second thing I want to, go ahead, I'm sorry.
One other question I had was around the 17 peer cities, if we can get any information on the number of staffing that their independent monitor's office or IG office has, budget or funding information around that, and any sense around the number of complaints that they investigate compared to the size of the department.
Got it. Thank you, Aaron. We're kind of building our agenda here for future meetings, so this is helpful. Any other thoughts about additional things you want to know? What I will say as you think about this is some of these things may not end up being meeting presentations. We're going to try to provide you as much pre-information going forward as we can. If we can, record a presentation and narrate it for you, we'll make those things publicly available, but it's going to be important that we, think about how we use these couple of hours together. And so you may, I guess that's the fancy way of saying you may have some homework at times throughout the course of this process. So just know that some of this information might not always be a presentation. It might actually be other forms of information we're providing, but it's still all important, and we're capturing all of it to look and see what we can provide to you as quickly as possible. Any other thoughts here? All right. Last two things we get ready to close. I want you to think about is any additional things on your mind relative to the work group or our intended outcome together. Certainly feel free to lift those up. And as well, if you have any thoughts around what challenges do you see in terms of reaching consensus about this? If you think about where we might stumble or where we might have some challenges. We want to kind of also mitigate as much of that as possible. And hopefully that won't be our case, but if there are any kind of things in the back of your mind about why this might not work out, I want to hear those as well as we think about how to structure and move this work forward. So any thoughts around either one of those comments as we close today? I guess I should accept that as cautiously optimistic. All right, with that said, we'll get ready to move in toward closing out today. Obviously, just the beginning of the conversation. We know today was long in terms of level setting you with information, but all really, really critically important for you. Couple things as we get ready to close. We have a number of education points coming out of today's meeting. We also have a number of documents or resources we need to get to you. And so you will start to see information flow. That will primarily be a Denise, probably coming from Kate and Matt. So just know that information will start to flow here in the next few days, and you'll start to receive the information, some of which you've requested, and then we will start to think about how to incorporate some of these other requests into the future meetings. Also, you'll be getting a direction around the next meetings that we'll be having. And so we know it's going to be a couple weeks out. We'll go ahead and start to germinate a early meeting schedule, knowing that will be kind of iterative as we continue to move the work forward. What we also are going to be endeavoring to do for the next meeting is to kind of lay out the major topics of conversation for these meetings, so you know where the decision points along the way will be, and you can kind of plan for those comments as it relates to those decision points. From your feedback and talking with folks that you represent about their thoughts around some of those points as well. So that'll be our kind of moving forward. I think we got some good work today started, so thanks everybody for your kind of participation. I'm going to turn to Ken Paul with the city just to have any additional comments from him and any of his team, and then we'll move to close the meeting.
I'll keep it real short. Thank you. I appreciate all of your time, your commitment to this work. I look forward to working with all of you. And Kate, Matt, and I are here to serve you. If there's information you need to be able to get the work done, you let us know. I will make sure you get it and that you have all the resources you need. Again, thank you. And I hope you have a good night and look forward to our next meeting.
All right. Thanks, Ken. All right, just a couple of resources here. This will be in the PowerPoint that gets shared. The first website is going to be All Things Civilian Review Board. So that'll be the public-facing site where this presentation and a number of other documents we talked about tonight will be posted. Obviously, you'll probably go via email. In certain instances, we might link to that website as well as a part of the communication with you. So once you know that, and if you are just a glutton for punishment and want to read more about Ohio Sunshine Law, there's a whole link there to underscore the presentation we had earlier around the responsibilities around open meetings and keeping things in the public life. So we wanted you to have that resource as well. As we get ready to close, any closing thoughts, comments, feel free to chat those or say those now as we get ready to close tonight's meeting.
If a question is presented to any one of us as members of this group with respect to the operations of this panel, who do we direct them to for answers as being our spokesperson?
Wonderful. So that is the last slide you see up. Your official support will be Kate is your primary, Matt's kind of the backup. And so I've given you both their emails. They're going to be the official city representatives. You probably don't want to ask me. I'm probably not going to have an intelligent answer for you. So I'm going to probably refer you to Kate, as well as if there anything that's on the record as it relates to the media and those kind of things. You also want to refer those to Kate as well, and they will get you the appropriate response as quickly as they can. So Kate, I'll come to you. Any closing thoughts or comments from you?
Again, I'm just really excited to be able to work with this great group that we pulled together. Thank you all for agreeing to work with us. And like Ken said, we're here pretty much around the clock for anything that you might need. Thanks again.
All right, folks. Seeing no comments, then we will prepare to close today. Thank you so much for your time. We'll talk again in a few weeks. A lot of information coming forward. Thank you again for your commitment to this work, and we'll talk soon.
Good night, everybody.